Turn your Bible, if you will, to Numbers, the 12th chapter. Numbers chapter 12, verse number 1. God has a place in his kingdom for you. That there is a place in the kingdom of God for you. This particular time in history of the Israelites was a time whereby the Israelites had exited from out of Egypt. And they were there in the wilderness with their wilderness experience. This wilderness experience put them in a place where the 11th chapter talks about how they had started to murmur, complain to God about their living condition. It goes on to talk about how there were those who were called the mixed multitude had begun to complain that they had basically, what they were saying, they gotten tired of eating manna that had fallen from the sky. They had gotten tired of eating the same food every day. The mixed multitude were individuals who were non-Hebrews. They were mixed with Egyptians and other nations which had followed the Israelites out of Egypt. They were those who perhaps had intermarried and in a relationship, but they were a great number of people. The Bible, when you study the history of the Hebrews, you'll find that the mixed multitude not only followed them out of Egypt, but the Bible says that they are also with them even today. Which means that the relationship that and the influence that the Hebrews had on the mixed multitude was one that kept them captivated or kept them interested or kept them involved in the worship as and live life as Hebrews did. But here in the 11th chapter, they were complaining. And we find that in complaining, what happens when people have a tendency to complain, they tend to stir up other people. People that ordinarily wouldn't complain begin to complain because someone has put a bug in their head, spent a thought in their minds of things that they probably wasn't thinking about anyway. But because they placed that thought in their mind, they begin to think like the person they put the thought there. So they begin to complain as well. Well, God fixed that problem, and there was a fire that was burning, and they were crying about that, and that there was some thing that was happening. They just was complaining. You ever been in a situation where you were around someone that complained on a daily basis? For those individuals who have been in management, you understand that complaining just only starts things to uproars in job places and in families and relationship when you start to complain. And well, they were complaining, and so the Lord stepped in and fixed the complaining by having the east wind to blow in some quail. And so now they got quail to eat for 30 days. Quail is a bird that has a large breast, and you eat that particular bird is a pretty tasty food, but they didn't want to eat it every day. They began to remember how it was back in Egypt. Now, to remind you that in Egypt, they were slaves. But something about complaining or about your current situation will cause you to think about your worst situation in the past as being better. And so then they begin to think about, well, I remember the cucumbers, the links, the onions. And I remember the fish that we could just eat like we desired. And I started thinking, I said, well, do you remember when Pharaoh was killing all your little boys? Do you remember when you were building up all the pyramids there in Egypt? Do you remember all the hardship that you were going through? Do you remember how they were taking your wives, your daughters, and having their way with them? Do you remember that you didn't have charge over what time you got up? Do you remember how you were living in Goshen there in one of the best, richest places that Pharaoh during Joseph's time had provided for you? But this provision in which you had during Joseph's time had turned into a curse, because now you're no longer free to raise your crops and to live. You're now slaves. But it's a thing that happens when you begin to get trapped into complaining. You have a tendency to forget about all the bad things. And we find here in the 12th chapter, Miriam and Aaron begin to complain as well. Sometimes when people complain, there's a hidden agenda as to why they're complaining. They started out by letting Moses know that you have married an Ethiopian. Now, one of the things I want you to understand is that to marry an Ethiopian probably don't mean a whole lot to a church full of black folk. But to those individuals who were in Miriam's and Aaron's family, it was a pretty big deal, because the Ethiopians were individuals who were of the land of Midian. They were from the seed or the loins of Cush. Cush was the son of Ham, and Ham was the son of Noah. Ham was the one that had looked in on his father when his father was drunk and naked. Ham was the one that his father had woke up out of his drunkenness and nakedness after being covered up by his other two sons, and cursed Ham. And that curse on him put him in a place whereby he was told that he would serve his brethren for the remainder of his life and his family's life. It was a curse put on his family by his father, by God. And now Moses have married one of them. And here it is that Miriam and Aaron, they're not reminding Moses that when you left out of Egypt and went and stayed 40 years on the backside of the desert and spoke to God there by a bush that was burning, it would not be consumed, and then God giving you the charge to come tell Pharaoh to let his people go. And Pharaoh now has let the Israelites go, and now they're in the wilderness. Moses don't get any points for that. What Moses get is that you've married an Ethiopian. Moses writes it down is the reason why they're coming against me is because of the marriage to an Ethiopian. Now, what they were saying was that you've married a black girl. That's what they were saying. What they were saying was you've stepped down in society. That's what they were saying. Now, the thing I want you to understand is that what Moses had going for him was, at a time when he needed somebody the most, at a time when everything was working against him, at a time when Pharaoh had him cast out of Egypt and told never to return again, he wandered about in the desert, found himself by a well, found that there were 7 daughters that Jethro had that came to give water to their flock in the evening, and make sure that they brought water back to the house for the family. There was no boys in the family. Usually when they went to the well, the other shepherds would be there and they would have to wait their turn till everybody else got water. And they would make it home late. But this particular day, when Moses showed up, the father asked him, why is it that you got home so early? And what they were saying, they told him was that there was an Egyptian, because that's what Moses looked like, an Egyptian there at the well. And the Egyptian was the one that held back the shepherds while we watered our flock and brought water back home. Their father said, you have had a man treat you this way and you didn't invite him in? He invited Moses into his family. He gives Moses one of his daughters, his oldest daughter. Moses now had been cast out of Egypt, been sent down the Nile River by his mother, and has grown up in Pharaoh's palace. Now he's in a situation where he spent 40 years, he's spending 40 years in a place where it's not his home. But it's 40 years where people are treating him as a part of the family. One of the things I want to understand about good old black folk, I'm talking about the same folk that picked all the cotton for all these rich folk in the world today. The same folk that made America the richest country in the world almost immediately. The same folk that had built houses and didn't get paid. The same folk that had reared children, 10, 12 children at a time, and just had enough food to sustain themselves at a time. These same folk, now they have built America up. These same folk, I'm just bringing you from Moses and giving you a parallel as to where you are today. These same folk who have nursed white babies. These same folk who have sacrificed families being sold. These same folk who have given up all to make sure that someone else had more than what they needed to survive. Those same folk are looked down on and saying that you've married an Ethiopian. Now, the thing that I want you to understand is that what Moses had going for him was this same family had taken care of him and brought him to a place where he was able to go back to Pharaoh. This same family had taken care of him, that had given him a daughter, that had given him son, that had given him opportunity to be a father and a caretaker. The same folk that they're talking about had allowed Moses to have charge over all of his flock. The same folk that they're talking about had allowed Moses to grow up spiritually. However, Moses had no idea what God's voice sounded like. When God began to speak to him through the burning bush, Moses turned aside because the bush was burning and would not be consumed. And God began to let him know that take off your shoes. See, the thing I want to understand is watch this. Sometimes we go through life and we forget about being holy. Sometimes we go through life and we forget about God. But God brought it to his attention. Take off your shoes, Moses. For the ground that you're standing on is holy ground. And then he gave Moses a charge to go back to Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Moses began to let him know that I can't speak. Pharaoh knows that I stutter. Everybody knows that I can't speak plainly. And God asked him the question, who made your mouth? Moses still complained about going back. God let him know that then I'll send Aaron, your brother, and Aaron will speak for you. God always got a plan to work out his plan. And see the thing, while we're turning God down, God is working his situation out on our behalf. So here it is. Moses' wife was used to help Moses to become the man that God had called him to be. They had their son before he was 8 days old. They were supposed to be circumcised. Y'all are hearing what I'm saying? And so here this Zipporah began to let him know it's time to make sure that our son is circumcised. The angel of the Lord was angered against Moses. And what he was going to do is take Moses' life. Because Moses had not circumcised his son, but his black wife stepped in, and she stepped in right on time and saved Moses' life. See, I want you to understand something. Watch this. Black people has always been a part of God's plan. Don't let nobody tell you that you're not worth something, because God has always used you to make his plan become a reality. Wait a minute. Moses here in the wilderness is being challenged by his brother and his sister about being married to Ethiopian. And God heard the conversation. Y'all are hearing what I'm saying? Why are you trying to fight battles for yourself? God hears the conversation. And what God told him was, the three of you meet me there at the tabernacle. And what God did was, when the three of them went to the door of the tabernacle, God began to speak to Aaron and began to speak to Miriam. And as they began to speak to Mary and speak to Moses' brothers and sister, he began to let them know, well, get out of my they said, God don't just speak to you. God speaks also to us as well. What God said to them was, if there's a prophet among you, I'll speak to him in visions and dreams. But to Moses, I speak to face, and I speak plainly to Moses. And the anger of God was kindled against them. And so God left, and the smoke left as well. When that happened, I understand, Miriam had leopards. See, watch this. While they're coming against you, you don't go back and come against them. Don't let the hatred that people use cause you to use the same hatred back at them. God don't punish me or what you do to me. What God punished me for is how I react to what you do to me. Watch this. All you got to do is be still and know that he's God. When the Spirit of God left, now Moses' sister, Miriam, she has leprosy. Her brother Aaron looks at her, and she's white as snow. What he did was, he turned to Moses and began to talk to Moses about praying to God for them. Their sins were before them. They understood that they were the one that caused it. And they also understood that one that had a friendship with God and knew how to get in touch with God was Moses. And so watch this. And so Moses prayed, heal her now. And what God began to tell Moses was, if her father had spit in her face, would not, watch this, the shame, in other words, watch this, sample commentary. Weren't you ashamed? Didn't you have some kind of feeling about you when you started talking about the man of God? Weren't you ashamed? Didn't you have some kind of feeling about you when you started talking against the man of God? Wasn't there something inside of you that should have moved when you start talking about the man of God? You ever wonder what happens to you in your life when you begin to put your mouth on the man of God? Sometimes he brings things upon you, and then other times he brings things upon your family, and then other times he calls you to go through stuff, all because of what you have said. Wow. And the only one that could fix it was Moses. Out of all that she was going through, The only one that could fix it was the one that they were doing it to. No, wait. In the black, you remember when the black church used to pray? You remember when the black church used to fast? You remember when the black church used to have revivals? You remember the strength in the black church when they had prayer meetings? I want you to understand something. There's still a purpose for us in the kingdom. We need to go back to the old foundation and start doing it the way God called us to do it. We need to start praying the way we used to pray, not just for ourselves, but for the whole nation. God has a plan, and we are a major part of God's plan. Okay, I know this sermon was about 15 minutes long, but I'm going to cut it. When they took Jesus from courtroom to courtroom, when they took Jesus and found him guilty of love in the first degree, when they took Jesus and whipped him all night long, when they took Jesus and put a beam on his back and told him to go up to Golgotha's hill, when they were on their way with Jesus going up to Golgotha's hill, there was one that was named Simon of Cyrene, a black man that was standing by the wayside as Jesus was taking the cross up to Calvary's hill. He helped Jesus. There's always been a need. Woo! For you. We have to make ourselves available for God to use us. Must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world be free? No, there's a cross for everyone, and there's a cross for you and me. Took Jesus to the Calvary. He stayed there from the 6th to the 9th hour, dropped his head in the locks of his shoulder, gave up the ghost. Early Sunday morning, y'all hear what I'm saying? 3 days later, Jesus got up with all power in heaven and earth in his hands. I'm so glad that he did. I'm so glad that he saved a wretch like me. And he said the same power that raised Jesus from the dead, we have. Now here you are concerned about whether or not people see you as an Ethiopian or not, or marrying an Ethiopian. And so what I did was, we live in an age of electronics. So while I was in my office waiting to come out, Frida, I decided I asked my electronic device, are Ethiopians black? And this brother come right back like, peep. Look, here's what he said. In my family has gone back generation after generation after generation after generation after generation after generation after generation. And we are all black. Because I was one to challenge someone to say, all Ethiopians are not black. So what he did was he said, some of us are lighter, some of us are darker, we're all mixed up, but we're still the same family. And yes, Ethiopians are black. And so you wonder if there's a need for you in the kingdom. So I looked at Rahab. The Rahab was one that was there in Jericho. She was one that was there that owned a whorehouse in Jericho. It said that she was a harlot there at Jericho. The Bible said that she had men that was come in and buy women from her. And she would sell women to men. But Joshua sent 2 spies out to spy on the land. And when Joshua sent the spies out to spy on the land, they found out there were some spies over in Canaan spying out the land. And they sent out droves of soldiers trying to capture the 2 spies. Well, there at the house, Rahab was hidden. She hid those 2 men. And when she hit those two men, here's what she told them. I know that God is going to give you Jericho. I know that God's going to give you back your land. And when he does, spare me and my family. See, the one thing we understand is sometimes it can't just be about us. Sometimes we got to make sure that our families come on board. And it said, y'all hear what I'm saying? And it said that when Joshua and the Israelites defeated Jericho, the walls of Jericho fell down. And it said that they brought her out and her family along with them. And they're with them even until today. Wait a minute. So I wanted to know, Brother Green, was red black? It said that the Canaanites were African. And because the Canaanites were African, the chance of them being black was more likely than not. And so here we are again. The same folk that nobody won't have nothing to do with. The same folk that they'll work your finger to the bone. The same folk that they don't want to give any restitution to. Every country in the world that has come to America, for whatever reason, has always got restitution. Some kind of help, except the ones that they stole from their mother's land, the ones that they brought here, that wasn't willing to come, and made them work by the sweat of their brow. Now here we are thinking that we're nobody. Listen, if it had not been for us, it wouldn't be none of this. God has always used this Black History Month, right? God has always used us. Don't let nobody tell you that you're worthless. You're worth something. And the reason why I can tell you that you're worth something, over 2,000 years ago, Jesus came to seek and to save that which was lost. I'm so glad he saved a wretch like me. I'm so glad he set me, y'all ain't hear what I'm saying. He set me spiritually free.
What an incredible message from our man of God here at Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church. Now's the time where we can all participate by giving. You can use our PayPal link on our website, www.3mbc.org, or www.facebook.com/MMMBC. We look forward to seeing you here on the Mount. God bless.